Okay, so we're going to keep going through our array algorithms. The next one's kind of a weird one here. We want to write a method that will add 5 points to all the IQs. Maybe they had Wes Patel as a teacher and they all got smarter by 5 points or something like that. Um, and so the tricky part on this one is I would anticipate here that if I want to change this array, I would need to return it to the main method. We need to have a return an array. Okay, but as weird as it seems, arrays are pointers in memory, and so that if you change it if you pass it in to the method, it'll actually pass in this array, and you can alter it in the method without having to return it to main, right? And that's only true of pointer variables. If you were doing it with a primitive like an int, that wouldn't be true. You'd have to pass it back to main to change it. Okay, so when I call this method, I can just name it whatever. So we can call it add5 or something like that, and I can pass in the IQ scores, and it'll change them all in the method. Okay, so as weird as it seems, you don't need to return. So if I come down and do the heading, so I'm going to do public static, and I don't need to return anything. So void, and call it add5 again, pass in int array, just like the previous ones. Okay, and now I'm going to loop as always, right? We're going to do this loop that we've done every single time so far, just loop through each position. So it'll get the ith value. Okay, so I'm going to access array position I. Okay, and what I really want to do with here is add 5 to it. So I'm going to say that position is equal to what it was before plus 5. Okay, so that'll actually change and add 5 to each of the IQ scores. All right, so I'm actually going to pause here and I'm going to show you what this looks like in the Java visualizer, just because I think it's confusing that it's actually altering the correct array. So here we go. Okay, so here's the code in the visualizer, and I'm just going to run it in here. And as I step through it, hopefully you can see it still. It'll create an IQ scores array and it points to it, right? That's what this little pointer is doing. So when I pass into the method here, notice that this array, normally it just takes on the value that's passed in, but here is the actual array. So array is pointing to the same spot in memory as IQ scores. Okay, so that when I loop through it, I'm going to do I is 0. So now I'm going to, position 0 is going to be what position 0 was plus 5 more. So if we watch, that'll change, and it changes it for both IQ scores and array. So basically this IQ scores here back in main is actually changing while I'm in the method. Okay, so now it goes to I of 1, changes position 1, changes position 2, position 3, position 4, etc. Okay, and then when I jump back, it returns void, but IQ scores is still pointing to the same spot, but now the values have all been increased by 5 because of this method. Okay, and so that's pretty complex to understand, but I thought this visualizer might help us a little bit understand it better. Okay, so last method is to calculate the average. So again, I'm going to have you try and think of what would be the input and the output, and how would you call it here, right? And you can pause the video and try all of it on your own, or you can just kind of watch pieces and then pause as you go. So give it a shot. Okay, so the average should be a double. So this method should return an average. If it's calculating the average, it's going to return a double. So I'm going to declare a double called average. I'm going to set it to be whatever is returned by this method. So I'm going to give it the name. I'm just going to call them the method average, and I'm going to pass in IQ scores. Okay, so I'm going to send in this array of ints, and then it's going to do the average, return it, and put it down here as a double. Okay, and you can have, I know I'd use average twice, but average is the name of my variable, and also I can have a method named average. All right, so now I'm going to create the heading. And again, you could pause and try this if you haven't already. So it'd be public, static, and then I'm going to return a double. And going to call it average, and I'm going to pass in an int array again, and I'm just going to call it the generic name of array. So this really could average any array of ints. Okay, and I'm going to literally do this same loop again, right? We're doing it again and again and again, where I hit every element starting from 0 less than the length. Okay, and this time I'm not adding 5. I just want to add it to a sum variable. Okay, so I would create a sum variable. And maybe I'm going to make it a double just to be safe, because I don't want it to truncate at the end. So I'm going to make it a double, and I'm going to say sum is going to be whatever sum was before plus the new array element, the ith element. Okay, and then I don't want to return sum here. I want to return the sum divided by the number of values. So if you haven't already, think about how could I easily determine the number of values. Okay, and the trick here is you can call array.length, right? So if it has like 5 numbers, the indexes will be 0 to 4, but the length will still be 5. So that just tells you how many things are in the array. You could also make a count variable and go plus plus count to keep track of the number of elements, but it's easiest just to do length here. Okay, and so we can run it, and if you want to test your code against mine, it looks like the average is 50. Oh no, I never printed it out. Never mind. And so I need to print it out up here after I call the method, print it out, and then looks like that's the average. And remember, it's been 5 has been added at this point. Okay, so if you wanted to check to make sure it's right, you need to do the average of these numbers, but all of them would have to have plus 5 to them, right? And so it looks like the average is that. And it would be different if we hadn't called the add 5 first. If I comment that out once and run it, I get a different average. Now, not surprisingly, it's 5 less, I guess. I guess that makes sense. So when I add 5 to all of them, the average should increase by 5. Okay, so that is it. These are just common array algorithms. You can save this code for your reference purposes. But one thing I really want to highlight is this loop where you start at index 0 and go less than the length plus plus 1. You're going to do that so many times with arrays, right? Like for loops and arrays are basically best buddies, right? And the reason you loop through all the elements, like that's super common that you're going to want to access every element in the array, the ith position. So you loop 0 less than the length. All right, that is it. Thank you for watching. Have a great